With the new featured exotic armors list comes fresh builds, and with it, some that are whack and some that are wild. So let's talk about Starfire Protocol. Solar as a subclass has a lot on offer, from restoration to radiant or scorch and ignitions, and one of the reasons why I love it as much as I do is how well all those elements work in tandem. I'm always drawn to builds that reward you for synergizing your elements or encourage you to optimize your subclass, and I'd be hard pressed to think of an exotic that complements that idea better than Starfire Protocol. Starfire brings to the table incredible solar synergy, perfectly bridging the gap between the utilities of solar and its damage potential. It's also an ability spam exotic that chooses to incorporate your weapons instead of leaving them behind, and as opposed to a similar exotic like Controverse that can often narrow your build crafting options, Starfire instead widens them. If you're unfamiliar, the way Starfire works is they grant you an additional fusion grenade, and anytime you defeat a target with a fusion, you get a full charge of your class ability. While that's already pretty great, the real kicker is right in the middle where empowered weapon damage regenerates your grenades, which, as of the launch of Edge of Fate, includes damage while radiant. Previously, you need to be posted inside of an empowering rift or a well in order to get these benefits, but this change means you can be completely mobile while still taking advantage of Starfire. By giving you multiple options to cause that empowered weapon damage, it opens up a huge array of combos you could use depending on your preferences and playstyle, while still making them all just as viable. You could use a healing rift and radiant if you like risk for survivability but want to still generate grenades in between them. You could also go with an empowering rift and restoration while focusing on Ember of Resolve to heal from your grenade kills, or you could use both restoration and radiant with Phoenix Dive to be fully mobile, pressing the advantage when you've got everything rolling. I love how much personalization Starfire offers, and the examples I just gave are all before you include weapons, armor sets, and artifact mods, which can change drastically based on those choices and can make a huge impact on your gameplay. Now, not to bag on Controverse, but I think it's a good example of the contrary, where there's really only one way to go about building into it and only one way to play with it. While you could make small adjustments like using Echo of Harvest for extra orbs, those decisions likely won't make a big impact on your gameplay, and there's a very clear way you're meant to use Controverse. With Starfire, there's so many different combinations and approaches that I could recommend to you, and each of them could completely change your gameplay and how you'd engage with the exotic. Maybe you want to be close quarters, working around fire sprites for restoration. You could go with Devil's Ruin to help generate more, and you could also cause extra ignitions. Maybe you want to use a healing rift and would prefer to stay at range. Hierarchy of Needs would be perfect as you hunker down, and you could also use a Bushido set to increase your survivability. Or maybe you want to focus on using an artifact mod like Cauterize Darkness. You could use New Malpays to spread suspensions and unravel, upping your grenade damage while still generating more of them through Radiant. For me, that openness and customization is the defining feature of Starfire, but the cherry on top is that it's also extremely effective and fun to use. When you can find that sweet spot for your playstyle, you'll be flinging fusion grenades everywhere, popping risks like a madman, and turning the whole battlefield to ash. Now, I could probably talk about Starfire all day, so instead, let's just go over the specifics of the build so you can see exactly what I chose to work with, and I can gush a bit more about it afterwards. For my aspects, I went with Touch of Flame as it causes your fusion grenades to explode twice, which, as you'd expect, doubles their damage and is a must-have when working with Starfire. I also chose to use Hellion as my second aspect since it's now considered a grenade and would benefit alongside my fusions from a high grenade stat. I wanted to lean into Starfire's changes, so I chose to go with Phoenix Dive as my class ability with a focus on Restoration and Radiant. Since I wasn't able to use a Restoration grenade in favor of fusions, I went with Ember of Searing as my first fragment to spawn fire sprites from scorched enemies, and Ember of Mercy to activate Restoration when picking one up. Ember of Searing also grants melee energy when you pick up a sprite, which was perfect paired with my third fragment, Ember of Torches, to activate Radiant with my melee ability. Finally, I chose Ember of Empyrean to maintain both Restoration and Radiant when I was slaying it with my fusion grenades or with any solar weapon. I also went with the Collective Psyche armor set to increase my max Restoration and Radiant timers from 10 to 15 seconds, which was great, so I didn't need to use one of my fragment slots on Ember of Solace. With all that in mind, I needed a solar weapon to work with Ember of Empyrean, so just for fun, I decided to go with Tommy's Matchbook, which ended up being the perfect fit. Tommy scorches targets on hit when its perk Ignition Trigger is active, which, as you can see here, can also grant grenade energy while you're radiant. Even after I stop firing, once I've scorched the boss, I get a few ticks of grenade energy back as it takes that scorch damage. I do want to mention, however, that this can be a bit inconsistent if you have multiple sources of scorch happening, and it was kind of awkward to test. Anecdotally, it seems like if the only scorch applied to the target is from Tommy's, it'll count as weapon damage, but as soon as there's other sources of scorch, it becomes ability based and no longer counts. While this is cool and may occasionally come in handy, it's not exactly something you can rely on, but I just wanted to mention this cool extra synergy. What does consistently help, however, is Tommy's huge magazine size and potential to cause ignitions. Tommy's is great for laying into enemies to generate a bunch of grenade energy, and if you're shooting a beefier target, you can easily cause an ignition for multi-kills to max out your buff timers. Since auto rifles are also anti-overload this season, it means Tommy's can stun both overloads and unstops, and with Radiant rolling on your special weapon, you'll have all three champs covered. For my heavy and specials, I wanted to use weapons with chill clip so I could take advantage of Cauterized Darkness, which can net you a 35% increase in solar damage. I was using a submersion with auto-loading holster and chill clip as my heavy for barriers, and for my special, I was swapping between Lionfish and Trachinus. Since both of these weapons can also roll with Rhyme Stealer, I was occasionally able to get Frost Armor into the mix as well for some extra damage resistance, and to take advantage of Frost Renewal and one with Frost. Speaking of artifact mods, Fever and Chill was a great choice to activate Radiant from rapid precision hits with Tommy's, but the two absolute standout mods are Radiant Shrapnel and Shield Crush. Radiant Shrapnel sends out scorching projectiles whenever you damage a scorched target or deal damage while radiant, which pairs excellently with Tommy's as it should almost always be active. Since that scorch can damage or kill other enemies and it can also line up Tommy's for even easier ignitions, it's a huge tool to clear crowds and help refresh your buffs with Ember of Empyrean. Shield Crush, however, really pushes things over the top, as it not only increases your grenade regeneration while radiant, but it also gives them a 25% damage boost. This boost applies to both Hellion and Fusion, which is incredible on its own, but with Cauterized Darkness, it can net you a total of 60% extra grenade damage. As you can see in this clip, testing against ultimate level Wyverns with a 148 grenade stat, my Fusion was doing 609 damage, and with Shield Crush and Cauterized active, it dealt 976 damage for that 60% increase. While there are a few aspects in this build that can be a bit situational and can sometimes take a bit of work to activate, I think it's really interesting to try and manage all of it at once. In no way do I think this specific setup is the quote-unquote optimal way to use Starfire, but I can tell you for sure it's a fun one. Working around Restoration and Radiant to free up your positioning is a total blast, and with the amount of Scorch and Ignitions you can cause with Tommy's, Hellion, and your Fusions, it's really easy to both spawn fire sprites and max out your buffs. Once those buffs are rolling, you can start slaying out with your grenades and your buffed weapons, and if you see a big target or a champion, you can hit them with a chill clip shot and absolutely decimate them. At the end of the day though, what I really loved about my time with Starfire was knowing that I was trying a rather unorthodox approach with it, but it still ended up feeling great and viable. It didn't feel like I was swimming upstream, fighting against Starfire to try to make something goofy work. I felt like I had an empty canvas in front of me and I could paint whatever I wanted. When I think broadly about buildcrafting and what makes it so special, it's that exact sensation. The sense that you can truly make a build your own and that your experience with an exotic can be completely unique while still working. It feels incredibly rewarding to test things out and find those cool synergies or find those big damage combos, and I really think Starfire does a perfect job of inviting that curiosity. It also feels like the ultimate solar build, as it takes advantage of every single piece of the subclass with Restoration, Radiant, Fire Sprites, Cure, Scorch, and Ignitions, and it does it all with such fluidity. While I think that's a testament to how well subclasses in solar specifically are designed, it's really Starfire that brings this build together and makes it so interesting. It's been an incredible expansion for buildcrafting, and Starfire finishes off the list of featured exotics, making this the last WACK or Wild of the season. While I have you here, I'd like to say thank you. If this is your first time on the channel, or if you've been around for the whole series, it means the world to me that you're watching. I'm extremely proud of this series, and I've had so much fun making these videos. I just hope you've enjoyed them as much as I have. The feedback on the channel and the series has been nothing short of phenomenal, and I truly can't express to you how much the kind words and thoughtful comments mean to me. With the removal of featured exotics in Renegades, WACK or Wild will be changing a little bit, but it will absolutely continue. I'll no longer have to work within the confines of a few exotics, and that also means that I'm going to open up the series to Hunters and Titans as well. For the next few episodes, I'll be covering the new exotics that come out in Renegades, but afterwards, I'd love to hear your feedback on what exotics I should do next, and I'll be going with the top voted comment on the previous episode. Until then though, thank you for your time and your support. I'm so incredibly excited for Renegades and for what's next on the channel, so I hope you stick around to enjoy the journey with me. They do say to save the best for last, so it feels pretty appropriate to have Starfire close out this season of WACK or Wild. It was a really interesting build to put together, and one that I feel represents the entirety of Edge of Fate and how terrific of a sandbox we find ourselves in. To me, Starfire Protocol is excellently designed, extremely fun, and absolutely wild. Thank you so much for watching, hope you enjoyed the video. There's a dim link down below if you want to give this exact build a try, or if you want to use it as the base for your own spin on it. Subscribe to the channel to keep an eye out for more videos soon, and let me know in the comments what you think of Starfire Protocol.